I have personally gotten a lot of questions, and a lot of people have opposed Aliyah specifically because they think that your kids are more likely to go off the derech or become not religious if you live in Israel. Do you guys have an opinion on that?
When I hear that, I just think, what are we as Am Yisrael saying when we say that the land of Israel is a place that we're afraid to raise from families?
Can I be honest? It reminds me of the Meraglim. We see Israel, we see it's like a thriving Torah community, and then people are like, no, it's not for religious Jews. Dr. and Mrs. Hochhauser, thank you so much for being here. It's really such an honor to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. So,
wait, am I allowed to interrupt and say what a nachas this is? There is nothing that makes a teacher more proud than seeing their students change the world and bring light to the world and make it a better place. And you're taking all of your passion and just using it to spread so much love and awareness about Israel and about how you can build a beautiful life in Israel.
Oh my gosh.
And it is such a source of pride.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I really got it from you. Like all of me has basically, so much of it was shaped by Tiferet, which is how we know each other when I took my year in Israel. It's really crazy thinking back, like all the memories that we had. Like I, have talked openly about my Aliyah journey, and you were there for a lot of it, trying to help me. And it's crazy how full circle we've come. So
it's amazing. Baruch Hashem.
So speaking of Aliyah journeys, I would love to hear yours. When did you both make Aliyah?
So we made Aliyah in August of 2007, which was almost 19 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
And from where did you make Aliyah?
So we made Aliyah from Edison, New Jersey.
Okay.
We got married in 1999 and moved around a bit while I was in graduate school. And then the last 5 years before we made Aliyah, we were living in New Jersey, which is my hometown, but Karen's also from New Jersey.
So you were living there, and at what point in your marriage, did you decide to make Aliyah, and why?
So I think that each one of us, for me, my year in Israel, I fell in love with this idea of the interplay of Tanakh and being in Israel and seeing the stories of Tanakh come to life in Israel. In fact, when I was teaching Tanakh in America and I told my students I was making Aliyah, they said, "Oh, of course, that's your dream, to be able to live in the place where those stories happened." And my husband came from a family where certainly that was something talked about, and we really followed my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, my husband's brother. They made Aliyah two years before us, and going to the airport and seeing them off, and they were on one of the first Nefesh B'Nefesh flights. It was really, really, yeah. They were real trailblazers. It was a very, very inspiring thing. And then I think we decided pretty much from that point on that this was going to be a goal that we were working towards.
I think that the idea of raising a family in Israel was something that we felt very strongly about, so we wanted to do. And I mean, also just growing up in New Jersey, the feeling of being in the minority, like walking past the public school on Sukkot with like my palm frond and like silver box with a lemon inside, basically, and like all the kids in high school like looking at me, and it's like, or driving through, commuting through Penn Station and having like Christmas songs blare, not just for on December 24th, but like, for months on it. And then somebody like,
right,
this is not my country.
Totally. And it's crazy that in Israel, it's the complete opposite. Like we have, like Hanukkah decorations everywhere, and people playing the piano, saying Hanukkah songs, like people handing, like the train station that I go to, they hand out things for Chayalim all the time, like waters and snacks and like just random sufganiyot. It's Hanukkah, like on the train, like it's such a different world. And what you're describing, which was like 19 years ago, I can't even imagine how different it is now, especially with all the anti-Semitism.
Right. I remember when I was pregnant with our first child, and we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl, and we were discussing names as one does. And I really liked the name Simcha. And I remember that my husband said, no, we cannot have any name that's a CH if we're living in America, because if it's a boy, he cannot be called Simcha his whole life. And that's just not something you have here. Yeah. Like here people have such poetic names for their kids,
right?
But that within there, the type of life that we wanted to build and create, even in the choosing of the names of our children, was something that we understood the difference living there and here.
Right. So you made Aliyah. What was the main pull? Like you're saying it's from Tanakh. Like why at the time, why then and there?
Well, I guess the why of the then, I mean, people sometimes I'll hear, I work, part of what I do is I work at Yeshivat HaKotel, and I know people will say like, even if they want to go back to America, they'll say, I'm coming up like a 3-year plan. We didn't have like a specific plan that said, okay, with this number of years, then we're going to go. Mm-hmm. It was always on the list. Or we know people that my wife always like tells stories, someone who didn't buy furniture or someone who left their watch 7 hours ahead, even they're living in it, for years. Right. Okay. But it was just more like, this is what we want to do. And if it was like a real thing, and when opportunities came up, we made choices that gave us better opportunities. Like my wife took an opportunity to be the Israel advisor for the yeshiva high school she worked in.
Oh, wow.
And I was working at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. So there was an opportunity to collaborate with Israeli psychologists. Oh. So I jumped on that. Okay. And then, but it wasn't like, okay, this is the date that it has to happen. And then like little by little it became clear that that's the right time. There was an opening. I do feel as a psychologist, the right time to make Aliyah, if possible, is before your kids start elementary school. Mm. That's like the best time to do it. It's not that you can't do it afterwards, but there's that window of time. It's not really about how, like if they're little, but after that and joining a school like later on or getting that becomes a little more challenging. So we met Aliyah. Our youngest was going into kindergarten, where they call here Gan Chova, and we felt like the window was like nearing the end, and like there was and again a few things fell together that gave us the opportunity, so we jumped on it.
But I will say I'm not sure we had one specific driving force, meaning. Some people will say, I once heard from a person who was blessed with a very large family, and they were like, we're making Aliyah because we can't afford to have such a large family in America. Mm-hmm. Like that was more, and obviously they had other things that they loved about Israel. It wasn't purely financial, but they really had that in mind. Again, I think to us, it was maybe more philosophical, meaning the land of Israel is the destiny of Am Yisrael. It's the future of Am Yisrael. And we wanted to be part of that future. And that was really important to us. But like my husband's saying, it wasn't that we said, okay, but therefore it has to be by this specific date or this specific, launching point. And Baruch Hashem, just a few different things sort of came together in the right way. And we were
What kinds of things came together?
What kinds of things came together? We just were, like he said, I think that the age of our kids, where we were professionally, we had this like the cutest little house that we were fortunate enough and blessed to buy in America. And we used to think about, wow, if our family gets any bigger, we're going to have to make a choice. We're either going to have to move or we're going to have to expand this house. And that sort of became almost like a philosophical point for us, meaning this house, we're going to have to make a choice. And so as we were thinking towards those things, and then I honestly will say, I don't remember why specifically we decided that exact moment.
My recollection is, again, it's also kind of fuzzy. It's more like, because I don't think it's what it was. I think it was more like, this is what we want to do. Yeah. There's not a specific number on that, but like, this is the right thing to do religiously, philosophically, practically, and all the different things. Like, that's where a Jew should be, which I believe to be true. I think it's also true that like, you just can't. This is what I felt beforehand, and I definitely feel much more about this even now, that to live a really, I guess I'd call it like integrated life as a Jew, where it's not just like bifurcated, like that's what I do here, that's what I do. No, but it's like you're actually, the whole thing is integrated. That really can only be done here. When you're here, you could do better or worse, but that it can be done here. So it was on the table. And then the question was always looking for the right moment to do it. And then we felt like this was a moment where we could take the plunge, and we did.
Okay. So you made Aliyah, then what? Where did you go?
So originally we were going to go to we had a different community. We were like, we're going to start a community on a hilltop with friends in Karen. I'm like, okay, and someone gave advice. Well,
everyone's dream.
Everyone's dream.
Right. Someone gave us ideas. Better have like a soft landing. Just get settled. This I think is good advice. Get settled. Just get your feet wet. Just you get on the ground, and then you'll figure it out from there. So that I think was good advice. We had the opportunity to buy something in a different community, which I'm not going to name, which would have been very nice also. The day we put our house on the market in New Jersey.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to. I really think there was a lot of siyata d'shmaya. Like I came on a trip And I was sending my husband videos. Don't ask me on what, because it was before the iPhone, but I was sending him, right. I was sending my husband videos saying, I'm standing in our dream house in this amazing community. Right. And it was going. And then last minute, the sale fell through.
Wow.
And it was at the moment, it was like quite a devastating thing. But for example, literally, I think it was on that same car ride, I was driving down to parent-teacher conferences at the school where I was working in America. And I found out that at the gas station that the sale fell through. And then maybe 20 minutes later, I got a phone call from Rabbi Rosner saying, I heard you're making Aliyah and, let's talk about Tiferet, meaning that all of these, or maybe I had put out feelers to a lot of different schools and that's why he called me. But the point is that what I saw was that it was real siyata d'shmaya. We were not supposed to live there. We were supposed to end up where we ended up, which was in Beit Shemesh. But now you can continue on with what happens.
That's the happy part. So the sad part of the story is that the day we put our house in the market in New Jersey, there was a massive nor'easter in New Jersey, which meant that tremendous storm, and all of the fantastic amount of water came into the city.
Oh my God.
And the water looks for the weakest point, and somehow the weakest point in the entire Edison municipal sewer system was under our house.
Oh my God.
And so we had raw sewage. This is like a G-rated podcast, but basically raw sewage just rising, and our house flooded with that and was destroyed. It was on April 15th, 2007. We weren't home.
We left. There was an open house. We took our kids to we had dropped our kids off at my in-laws. We went to do an epic, those Sunday restocks now that people make videos of, where if somehow magically everything they buy is monochromatic and in plastic containers in the fridge. We just got a restock for a huge shopping. We pull up to our house. I went to get the kids for my in-laws. My husband went to start unloading the groceries, and I come in with kids, 2 little kids, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I see him frantically, this dates us, looking in the phone book. I'm like, what? And he's like, just look, we could look from the door down to the basement. He's like, the basement. And we see the water rising. Yes. And we'll
skip all the details here, but let's just say that the house basically got destroyed.
Right.
And it was, at some point
the basement got destroyed. But we had a lot of water and a lot of damage.
How did we move out of our house? We didn't move out. We never slept in our house again. That was it. We moved into my parents' house. The house was specially cleaned and whatever else, but we never moved back. That's how we moved out of our house.
Oh my God.
I actually remember that when you sell a house, right, you have to make sure the house is clean. Right. So we had, while we were living in my in-laws' house, they basically rebuilt, we had to redo the whole basement so that we could sell our house. And I actually remember it was days before our Aliyah flight that the house needed to have that final cleaning. I don't even remember. The basement might not even have been done. But I remember that something I did was, instead of hiring a cleaning company, I was like, I have to go clean my house because I have to have a way to have a separation, a goodbye from this house. And I still remember no one was home. It was just me being in the kitchen, cleaning the kitchen of this house we had not lived in for 3 months, just crying over the emotion of everything that had happened, the emotions of saying goodbye, of by far the hardest thing in making Aliyah is leaving your family in America. I think that family relationships, of your family that you come from, parents, grandparents, siblings, are the most precious relationships. And as parents, we hope to instill that in our children as well, of course. Leaving those relationships behind was and continues to be the hardest thing. We're blessed that my in-laws live in Beit Shemesh as well, but my family still lives in America. And so that is by far the most difficult piece of Aliyah, including living in Israel, I think, in a time of war, actually, in a lot of ways. But I just remember standing in the kitchen, cleaning and crying over all of the emotional upheaval, and also at the same time sort of saying goodbye and closing that door, and also davening for what was going to be in the future.
Right. So what would you say, what advice would you give to people who would love to make Aliyah, but their family is in America and they're going to have to leave them?
So I think that, first of all, This is where technology is the most incredible thing. When we made Aliyah, we bought a webcam, a separate mounted webcam that went on the computer, and we used Skype, right? Who said the word Skype in the past, 15 years. And so now the beauty of the technology is that it's so easy. Now it is not the same. It is not the same. So I think to us, we always made that a priority. It was a priority for us every summer. And I really believe this. If you are doing something for the right intentions, Hashem helps you. We every summer, somehow Hashem made it possible for us to afford plane tickets to go to America, to bring the kids, to spend time with our families, to visit families like cousins and aunts and uncles, as well. Our children really, really know their family in America. They know their cousins in America. We were just blessed to go to my nephew's bar mitzvah right after Pesach, and my kids were so excited to be able to hang out with their cousins who live in America. And so I think that is something that has to become a priority, a very intense priority. You cannot expect to preserve relationships in the same way if you do not work hard at it when you don't live next door. And so that is something that I think that we have, and I think that we've really tried to also model that for our kids, that this is a value and that it is this is where you put your money, this is where you put your time, this is where you put your resources. I'll also say I think I have personally been blessed that in my work, both when I was at Tiferet and now even in my work now with the Yoatzot, that Hashem provides for me in my professional life multiple trips a year to America.
Wow.
So I can see my parents, and I have also been blessed. I mean, no one should ever have, any kind of difficulty in their life. But even before you say amen to that, you shouldn't say amen to it because that wouldn't be real life.
Right.
Everyone has different things. And I'm also blessed that I have been able with those trips that if there was something that I was needed for, not always, but I've been there. If there was something to celebrate, I've been there. And so I really feel the personal Yad Hashem in my life, that through my work, it is not a given that if you're a teacher, your work will involve travel.
Right.
But both through recruitment and admissions, and again, my trips now, I look at it as a real blessing.
So what you're saying is there really is a way to make it work, and you have to put in effort. And if you are doing Hashem's will, then it's possible you'll really feel Hashem in your life, and you'll be able to accomplish still what you need in ways that you maybe could never imagine before.
Right. I actually saw, Ariel, I saw maybe it was around Mother's Day, you did a post, right?
Yeah.
I remember because I got teary watching it because I thought as I get older, I just cry about a lot more things. But it really made me teary because I thought you also really were able to encapsulate this exact tension. I love my mother.
Yeah.
I miss her like crazy, but I also know she's proud of me, but I also know she wishes that she could see me every day.
Right. It's a really, really hard tension. And I agree with you. I think that it's probably one of the hardest things that people that you do here when you make Aliyah. One of the hardest challenges is your family. Whenever people reach out to me saying okay, I really want to make Aliyah, but I'm so close with my family and everything's perfect. And I don't know what to say to that because I get that. Right. Your family, it's really hard. But I mean, I guess my only answer to that is that life is hard, and you have to think of your broader family of Am Yisrael, and that's where we are. Our future is here. So speaking of that, I'm so curious. I would love to hear more about what you two do professionally and how you were able to integrate that into Israel. You spoke about how you were a teacher and you were still able to integrate that into your lifestyle. Can you tell me about what you do, Dr. Hochhauser?
Sure. So I'm a psychologist, a clinical and health psychologist, and I work at Yeshivat HaKotel also, which is something I never, all my students about this, I never anticipated whatsoever that I would ever, I never want to be a teacher. That's terrible. But probably because of the way I treated my teachers. But if they're listening. But yeah, I said never want to do that, but I always loved teaching Torah. And so the only job I had when I made Aliyah was Yeshivat HaKotel reached out to me the months before we made Aliyah. And they heard that I was making Aliyah, and they said they were looking to bring a psychologist on to work in the yeshiva, which at the time I think they were the only one to do that, or one of the first to do that, or at least in that way. So that was the only job I had when I got off the plane. It was just 1 day a week working Yeshivat HaKotel. I was an in-house psychologist to work with the boys. They wanted me to teach as well, to give a shiur, because they felt that would help it, destigmatize psychology, which is, again, unintended consequence, which is great because I love doing that anyway. And over the years, the amount of shiurim that I give at HaKotel has expanded, and I've connected to it even more, which has been great. That expanded also from a small part of what I do to it got bigger. And over the year, after making Aliyah, I also started working at a hospital and eventually opened up a private practice. I work now with Zichron Menachem, which is an organization for Israeli children with cancer. So again, part of my Aliyah also was I said, okay, I'm going to just jump right into the Hebrew and
that's
off the
pretty
bat.
Courageous and brave. I feel like a lot of Olim don't do that.
Yeah. So the message is that if you want your Hebrew to get better, the only way to do it is just to do it anyway, and know for a fact in advance that you're going to embarrass yourself like crazy. I can tell you good stories, but I definitely embarrassed myself over the years. I said, look, I know I'm going to fail. I know I'm going to embarrass myself, and that's fine, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then I approached some of the other things perhaps we can talk about is I think that the language ended up being the less hard part of that. I think the cultural aspect is harder than the language aspect of being Aliyah.
Wow. Please expand on that.
Well, language is language. So this is called a mug or it's called a seifel, and you figure it out, you move on, right? It's not that complicated. But I don't know what it's like to have gone to the army or, what certain things mean. Again, we talk about education. It's like what high school means in America, how that works, how that functions. And I was 32, so most of my exposure culturally is a certain way, and sometimes it's even an unknown. I don't even know what I don't know. I don't know the question to ask. Now I do, okay, but when I made Aliyah, these things you don't know them, you don't even know that you don't know them, and so that aspect has been about harder. And again, working as a psychologist, part of being a good psychologist is understanding at some level the culture of the person you're talking to. So on one level, that takes a lot of work to get to know that culture. Whether that culture means being in the army or having cancer with Baruch Hashem, I don't. Or working with anybody. These are the experiences I don't have, and I have to educate myself on what that means, or else I can't function with the person.
Right. So you work with children, and you also have children. What is that like, raising kids in Israel?
I guess that's a very big question. I guess we really always wanted to raise kids in Israel and to be proud of that this is their home and this is their community and this is their country, and it's been an amazing thing, and to be a part of something big. I think there's called tsar gidul banim, right? The idea it's the pain that goes along with raising kids, which I'm sure I know that I caused it to my parents along the way. May have done it here and there.
Plenty.
But the reality is, I think it's definitely an amazing place to raise kids. Israel is it's a very family oriented country. Mm-hmm. I think this is something that I feel more as a dad than she probably feels as a mom. I remember as a dad working in New York, I wanted to be home for my kids' sitter party. Forget the fact that my boss didn't really know what that was. It doesn't matter. Okay, but the fact that I wanted to be there for some kind of performance, and my boss really not understanding but you're the dad. Why would you want to do that? And the involvement of fathers in raising their kids was something that I got zero understanding in the workplace in America. And here it's a given. It's a given that the father is involved in the day-to-day of their kids' lives. It's very important to be an involved father. And here that's the norm. It's a country that takes having kids seriously. It's a value. Raising kids, being involved parents, there's this flexibility, there's understanding,
I'll share a story that actually is less about parenting in Israel and more about parenting in America. My husband, when our kids before we made Aliyah, he only spoke Hebrew to our kids in America, meaning I spoke in English and he spoke in Hebrew. And to the extent that, let's say, our daughter, who was 5 when we made Aliyah, if she had a friend over, he would, and they'd all 3 of them be standing in the kitchen, he would say to the friend, do you want something to drink? And then he would say, Shira, rotza mashu lishtot. And her whole life, she only heard Hebrew come out of his mouth. And people would ask all the time, oh, are you teaching your daughter Hebrew because, you guys want to make Aliyah? And my husband would be like, no, that's ridiculous. If we make Aliyah, of course our kids are going to learn Hebrew. I'm teaching my kids Hebrew because if we stay in America, my kids are going to understand the siddur. They are going to know how to daven, and they are going to be able to open a chumash. And if you don't teach them Hebrew because that is not their native language, how are they going to get it? Because the most kids who graduate and there are many things about the education system in America that are stellar, but most kids do not walk out with a strong Hebrew. Depends on the school, some more, some less, but to him that was a value to inculcate in our kids. And the minute that we
actually after that my friends would say, how do you do that? It's amazing. And I'm like, my daughter's 2. Like, you can speak Hebrew on a 2-year-old level. And then it's like, well, then what? I'm like, well, by next year, you got to be on a 3-year-old level, and then on a 4-year-old level, and then a 5-year-old level, and you'll just grow with them. And that was unintended consequence that my Hebrew got much better also. My joke was that I'll start bench pressing my kid, who's like, at the time, weighed 30 pounds. And then by the time she's in college, I'll be huge. Like, that would be, because that is, if you just do it little by little, you'll get better. And it's...
And we had, we looked up a lot of words in the Milon, a physical, actual paper dictionary. We had a million books in Hebrew. And I'm sure that there were mistakes, but the point is that value was there. And then I remember when we stepped off the plane in Ben Gurion Airport for our Aliyah flight, that my husband turned and said something to my daughter in English. And she was like, what are you doing, Abba? Like, this is not the way that we communicate. But the minute we landed here, we knew that their Hebrew would end up being very strong, and that we actually wanted to make sure that their English was strong as well, because that would only help them. And the more language a child knows, the better off they are in the world. And so then we switched to English. And so I think, but the point is that the fact that was something that we were thinking about in America, actually showed how important it was for us to live here, because that idea of saying that it's a holistic experience. No one here is looking at you like you are a strange person or maybe a terrorist if you stop literally anywhere in the country to daven mincha.
Or shach with tefillin on.
Right. Or someone sees someone with a sefer, someone sees someone making a bracha. I had an experience a week and a half ago that I was driving home on the highway and my tire blew out on the highway.
Oh my God.
It was crazy. And this guy next to me is like, motioning for me to move over. He jumps out of his car and changes the tire to the spare. This guy, this random guy.
Oh my God.
And as I'm thanking him, I said, tell me your name. Is there something I could daven for you? And he was like, I should have a shidduch, daven for me for shidduchim.
Wow.
And then he's like, and I'm also in Mazganim. I also work in air conditioner. And I was like, this is such a great example of an Israeli experience, that here's this guy, I took his phone number but that's what it is to live here. Or when you come out of the hospital and your baby, their sock falls off and 100 saftas are like, your baby's feet are freezing. You have to go get more socks. Or you don't mind. My kids will be like, oh yeah, we were just on the bus and some lady asked us to hold her baby. Could you imagine being on a bus in Manhattan and handing your baby to just a random person?
Oh my gosh.
Never.
Social services would literally take your kid away for doing that.
They definitely would.
Right. But that's the point here, is that, and it's not that we all know, and certainly living in these times, it is not perfect and there are dangers. And I am probably the place here where I'm most American is about, maybe not most, but about safety.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that there are parents who are just like, oh, you're in Israel, anything goes. So you could walk down a deserted path at 3:00 in the morning by yourself if you're a 15-year-old girl. I do not think that's true. I think that we have to make good choices. We have to recognize that there are people in the world, even in Israel, who are not good people and who do some pretty terrible things. And we have to use our seichel. We have to use our common sense. But that is not if I'm in the mall and I turn around and I can't find a kid, it is not the same feeling here as it is there. Here, I know this once happened to us. I promise we're responsible parents, but once we lost a kid in the mall when she was little, very little, and we're frantically searching the whole mall. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of our life. It was Hanukkah vacation. We were at the Modi'in Mall, and she was just standing by Gali shoes with some lady who worked in the store who was like, I figured that someone was looking for this like cute girl. And it was, I wasn't worried about anyone taking her. I was more worried, what if God forbid she wandered out to the street or something?
Right.
But
It's such different realities
Right.
here versus there.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. So tell me about, I have personally gotten a lot of questions, and a lot of people have opposed Aliyah specifically because they think that your kids are more likely to go off the derech or become not religious if you live in Israel. Do you guys have an opinion on that?
You're going to have a lot more to say. So I want to say one thing first, is that when I hear that, I just think, oy, like what are we as Am Yisrael saying when we say that the land of Israel is a place that we're afraid to raise from families?
Can I be honest? It reminds me of the Meraglim.
Yeah.
Like literally going into, like, we see Israel, we see it's like a thriving Torah community. And then people are like, no, it's not for religious Jews.
Right.
That's crazy.
And I understand, by the way, the concern. There's definitely a certain amount of a mentality, almost like a conveyor belt. And trust me, I think that parents in America have tsar gidul banim, and I think that it's hard to raise children no matter where you are. And I think that there are things that are difficult and complex no matter where you live in the world. But I think that there is something to the American system that it's like elementary school, high school, year in Israel, Stern College, and not everyone's on that path. But I'm saying if you would choose that path, it's just an example.
But do you think, and I don't know because I didn't grow up religious, but so I don't know the whole like New York community and conveyor belt, but do you think that conveyor belt produces passionate Jews?
I do, actually. I do. Not every. I think every person's an individual.
Yeah.
I think it depends. Of course, I think anything produces people who are passionate and people who are less passionate.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there is something, if a person is a person who is seeking Hashem and seeking a meaningful Jewish life, and again, I used YU as an example, hashkafically, but I think it can apply to multiple hashkafas. I do think so, actually. Okay, now, I just really, I just think the emotions behind that, how are we yearning for the Geula if we say, okay, but not yet, I need to wait till the whole educational landscape is perfect and then I'll come. I don't know how those two things
emotionally,
go together.
It's a bit of a crazy thing to grapple with.
Right.
But I also brought you both on because I know that you're so knowledgeable and have so much practical and actual experience raising children here. And also just you have a lot of knowledge from your work. So I'd love to know practically your answer.
Sure. I'll say two things. I'm going to say 30 seconds on the philosophy and then I think, right. I think in Israel here we're sitting on Parshat Shlach. I definitely think that that's not the time to speak negatively about, Eretz Yisrael. I would also say I was very influenced by the introduction to Ema Banim Smecha, where he says, people have said, well, I don't know if Israel is the right place for me. There are these challenges, so therefore, Sheva al tas adif, better not to go. And his answer is, among the many other things he says, which is very, very highly recommended you read it. He says is that, look, if all those people would just move, there's the complaint that the government's not religious enough. He was writing this in the early 1940s. It wasn't even the Israeli government yet, but he's like, you're worried that it's not religious enough. Well, if all the people who complain about that would just go, then it would be religious enough. So instead of, that's something I was raised by my parents. Like if you have a problem, it's the education I got growing up from my parents, I can definitely say is that if you have a problem with something, instead of complaining about it or just whining about it or avoiding it, so go over there and do something about it. And that is definitely the philosophy that I've tried to do.
I think in general, what I've found is that that's the philosophy in Israel. Like that's why we are considered a startup nation, because we have found problems and we have done something about it.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
I think, well, I have other things about startup nation, but that's for another time. But I would also say that, look, I think sometimes you guys call it a conveyor belt. And I think the idea of a conveyor belt sometimes is like, this is what I know, this is what everybody does. And I hope it doesn't sound pejorative because I don't mean it like that. But it's a system that I grew up in. So I know what elementary school is. I know what high school is. I know what, the SATs and the GREs, I know all these things. And I know that if I follow this well-trod path, like we're living in a probabilistic world. That's going to give my kids the best odds. Because let's just be honest, no matter what country you're living in or what neighbor you're living in, there is no guarantee of anything. As a psychologist, I get to see people from all different communities, everyone from, Borough Park to Bnei Brak to Beit Shemesh to Tel Aviv. There's no guarantee of anything. But yeah, there are certain things it's really about odds. What can I do to give my kids the best odds of success? Mm-hmm. Certain things give you better odds, and there are certain things that are riskier and certain things that are more safe. But I know this system; it makes sense to me. I think some of the problem, but sometimes what happens when people make Aliyah is they are trying to do what they know, like to follow a certain style of parenting or a certain style of education, but the new context doesn't match that. Okay, and that manifests in two ways. One of them is, I think in America sometimes, I remember I had a student once who said that they asked their parents a certain halakha question, and the dad said, "Why you ask me that? That's why I send you to school." Oh my God. Okay, I'm not knocking the dad, because the reality is that's why parents send the kids to school. You send your kid to school, you hand your kid off to school, and you say that kid, my school is going to give Yirat Shamayim and teach halacha and avat Pedspsychisrael and all and avat Klal Yisrael and all the, that is why I'm sending my kid to school.
In some communities, I'm not sure that's true in every community.
Sure, and then I think in some communities that's what the expectation is, and I think when in Israel that is. Again, as my wife correctly pointed out, it's not true in every community. But in certain communities, if that's your expectation, that's what you grew up with, and then you come to Israel and expect the school to do that, and they don't, now we're in a real problem. Or again, my wife likes a lot, in Israel, in America, it's a private educational system for the yeshiva. So therefore, that gives the schools a lot more latitude about, for example, things like discipline, things about how much they're enforcing rules and things like that. And so sometimes what parents do is they're out, if we're being honest, they're outsourcing tznius enforcement. As an example, okay? They're outsourcing that to the school. A lot of parents, I've heard parents say, I'm not going to deal with it. I'll let the school be the bad guy. Now, that's a good idea, but I'm not here to judge any of these things. But what I do know is if you expect that from a school in Israel and that school's not going to do it, and yes, some schools do it more, some schools do it less, but the public educational system here has good parts and bad parts to it, right? But if you expect the school to do it, and you've outsourced that to the school, and so now we're in a real problem because I have something that I'm not doing, the school's not doing, so who's doing it? The answer is nobody. Mm-hmm. And I think that mismatched expectations sometimes can cause a legitimate problem.
So I have 2 kids, and my oldest is 3.5. So I'm not at that point yet that I'm like educating my kids on, serious Jewish values. So I'm asking, from your experience, just from my intuition, it kind of seems wrong what you're describing, that like parents are used to outsourcing their like education and their passion for Judaism and everything to a school. Like I get that schools are there, and I think in America you pay so much money to do that. So maybe you feel kind of like it's like you deserve to just have the school deal with that. I don't know what.
So I'm gonna. I'll just reframe. Right.
I'm not saying that that's a good idea in America. Uh-huh. I'm just saying that I think that there's definitely. I've encountered a lot of parents where, again, there's certain expectation. For example, like some high schools have the attitude in America that the goal is just to get the kid to the year in Israel, to keep him connected enough. Send the girl off to seminary, send the boy off to yeshiva, and they're going to fix him. They're going to flip him out. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. But the point is, there's a certain expectation that's going to happen. So I think there are certain parents that they're expecting that the school is going to provide certain things, but the parent.
But I'll say, feel free to disagree, but I think about it. I hear your question so much because it's just like, what kind of parent, like who brings a child in the world to then just outsource their chinuch to school? I don't think any parent is doing that, or the majority of parents are doing that. I think that in general, parents want what's best for their kids. And let's say I'm whatever my profession is, and I might say, but I'm not a Jewish educator. But here I'm sending my children to excellent schools, and they are surrounded by excellent educators and excellent programming and excellent everything. And therefore, I am relying on the school to be a partner with me in that journey, and almost like we're holding hands, meaning, and when it comes to and that's why I made the point of, I think different hashkafas do this to different degrees. And I'm not drawing any kind of stark lines in the sand, but I do think that there are different communities where parents take more active roles in their kids' education, take less active roles in their kids' education. Actually, you know what? Hold on. I'm scratching that. Don't say that. I'll say that I think that across the Jewish landscape, that you have all different types of parents. You have parents that really look at themselves as their children's primary educators, but maybe they feel less equipped, and so they partner with the school. You have parents that say, I know that whatever my children get at school, they also need to be getting a lot at home. And then you also have parents who say Jewish education is a value for me, but I also have my own mixed experiences, emotions, and memories of what that is. And sort of, I'm going to pick a school, and I'm basically going to really, really rely on the school. And I think that what you're describing certainly happens too, but I don't think that it comes from a place of not caring about our kids or not being responsible. It's just feeling like, where is the place that my child is going to get this the best? And in America, very often it is the schools that we pick. And in Israel, I think that the schools that we pick are very, very important. But what happens at home is it's something that is essential.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I guess when I say outsourcing, I guess that's more of an, I'm describing the extreme version of that. Okay, but there's a lot of things in the middle where I think the point is you can't have a situation where there's mismatched expectations. And I think if that happens, then that goes back to the idea before I said, making Aliyah can be a challenge because I don't exactly know what I'm getting into. And relying on people that have been here already, or Nefesh B'Nefesh, or other people to help me understand what that's like, that's going to be very helpful. But if I'm walking into something, and I think sometimes, or people assume, I think sometimes when you make Aliyah, like we've made it, like we're good. Like, we've got, this is the promise. I mean, it's a promise line, but we've made it. And this is in no way a knock on Israel, but I think that it's not like a graduation. Like I've done it. Now I can sort of, relax a little bit. That's not true. I think here there's challenge in education also, and that's not me being negative about Eretz Yisrael, Chas v'Shalom. Just there's challenges also, but there's different challenges, and I have to educate myself on what those challenges are and learn how to adapt to those. Some things here are much easier. Some things here are harder. I don't think that it's better or worse necessarily, but I think I have to at least understand like what the challenges are, and if I don't, then I could get hit hard.
I think for me, this is something that took me a very long time to learn. In Israel is totally normal, common. You have every teacher's cell phone number. You're in a WhatsApp group with the teacher and the other parents. And for the longest time, if there was something going on with one of the kids, I'd be like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't WhatsApp the teacher. I feel bad. Is it important enough? And over time, I learned, no, that's exactly what you're saying. That's the culture here. The teacher, when you get to parent-teacher conferences, which even here, parent-teacher conferences here happen incredibly late in the year, both the first one and then also the second one, and it's really a very basic check-in. And if you walk in and say to the teacher, but why didn't I know about this? In America, I remember even 20 years ago teaching in America, and there were already systems in place that if a student didn't do their homework in high school, that you put it into some whatever program in the computer, and then the parents would get a notification. That would never happen here. And so if you walk in and say to the teacher, what do you mean? My daughter hasn't done a math assignment? I see that my daughter hasn't done a math assignment the whole year so far. How come you haven't called me? The teacher will just look at you and say, how come I haven't called you? You're the mom. You're the dad. Why haven't you been in touch with me? This is your child. You're the primary educator. You're the one who's responsible. And that's not a knock on the teachers. In America, you would never get that reaction. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a cultural difference. So I think that when you realize that, especially as your kids get older and all of the different challenges of adolescence, settle in, it's about really digging deep and saying, I need to take an extremely active role here. I need to model. And I'll also say that, and I think in our community, which is the more, again, I don't like actually any of these community names, Dati Lumi Torani, whatever you want to call it. But there's a very big range. Even we get a newspaper, a Hebrew newspaper called Makor Rishon, which is really a newspaper for, I'd say, the entirety of the Dati Lumi, the religious Zionist community. And in it, you just leave the whole breadth of Am Yisrael, of religious Judaism. And there's men and women who look totally different in the pictures. There's different points of view. There's different articles. But that on the one hand, you could be like, wow, that is so beautiful. But on the other hand, it can be very complicated because you're not keeping your kids in, on the one hand, yes, it's true. You choose your lane for your kids very early on in their education. But if you pick that Dati Lumi lane, there's a very big range within it. And so it means that your kids are going to be seeing a broad spectrum of things. And a parent can't be afraid to talk about that in their house because, again, they're the primary educator.
I think also, again, coming from America, you have a sense of like, okay, well, it's a religious high school, so it's a religious elementary school. So like, I know what that means. I think that here, there's just, I think my wife was alluding to this, is a wide range of those kinds of places. And you have to choose wisely. You have to be an educated consumer. I think sometimes people come from America and they say, I sent my kid to, a more modern Orthodox kind of school. The analog of that is kind of like Dati Lumi. Kind of hate labels also, but fine. So we're good. We're staying the course. That's not necessarily true because it doesn't exactly mean the same thing here as it does there. You have to do a bit more digging, make sure that it's what you're looking for. If it is you're looking for that's great. I'm not here to judge anyone's choice. I just think that my take is that people should just make an educated choice and know what they're getting. If you do that, then okay, even if that's the choice that I would make, that's fine for them, fine. But I think people sometimes don't always get what they bargain for because they didn't do enough understanding of like what that means to make the certain choice ahead. I think even if it's like more to the Yeshivish Haredi community, I think sometimes like what that means in America is not what it means here. Again, I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's not my point. It's just it doesn't exactly mean the same thing. It's not a one-to-one comparison. And I think sometimes figuring out how to adapt and choose a community or choose a school that fits where you're coming from, where you want to go, is hard. And assuming that terms mean the same things or the categories mean the same, it could work out well or it could not. And that sometimes causes conflict also.
So from what I'm understanding from what you both are saying is that Israel and America are so different culturally. Like in America, you kind of have to, I guess it depends. You have to opt in to Judaism. You have to say, okay, I'm specifically going to go to a Jewish school rather than go to a random public school. And in Israel, the Judaism and Torah is literally everywhere. If you don't want it, you have to opt out. And even that, it's really hard to do in Israel. And because of that, the education is so different. And you can't go in assuming that the education is the same and that you're going to have to like understand that and change your way that you're maybe parenting at home to talk more about your values specifically, because like it's like if you go to a store and you go to like a little makolet, like a little supermarket, and they sell 2 brands of shampoo and you're like, okay, great, I'll just take one. That's what I'm used to. Versus in Israel, or if you go to a big store, they have, 300 brands, going to Target. And like that's kind of like in Israel, you come here and it's not like there's only 3, or in my case, like 1, Jewish school in like the 100, 200 mile radius. There's, even if you have a couple choices in Israel, there's a different one on every block. So you have to kind of make that conscious decision. And because everyone's Jewish, because everyone has like their different levels and different things that they practice at home, it's kind of like a mixed pot that you have to understand how to taste and digest.
Right. And there's you're pointing out actually something really, really important. I love that phrase in America. It's a bit more opt-in. And again, for From Families, it's move on may love, meaning it's an obvious opt-in. Right. But that idea is actually something really important because let's say last week when there was the Salute to Israel parade, right? So every school, every family, every person, they made a conscious choice. I'm going to march in this, even though I know there might be anti-Semitism, even though I know that people might be watching, even though there's going to be comments on social media, and in America, or in the diaspora world, I'm a Jew within a culture that's not mine, which means it actually sharpens you a little bit. And because then you say, I have to be a model. I have to stand out. When we go to America, I say to my kids, and our kids are big already. Before we get off the airplane, I'll be like, I want you to remember that you are now landing in, let's say, Newark Airport. Everyone is looking at you and you have to make a Kiddush Hashem. So all the fighting that you would normally, when they were little, even now, but whatever, all the fighting, you can't walk through Newark Airport like having a whole fight about something, because then people are going to look at you and say, that's how a Jewish family behaves. So on the one hand, there's a positive to that because it sharpens the behavior. On the other hand, and now I want to address that point of this feeling of, well, if I make Aliyah, like my kid's not going to be frum. It's not that again, anything can happen to anybody, but I think that the baseline here is so different. In America, it means if I go to public school, let's say, or yeshiva or whatever, and I am not religious, it means you are so wholly not religious. You might be what we call Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Jew. And there's nothing wrong with that or bad with that, but you're basically making this choice. Religion's not a part of me. Here, you could be in a store that is, is open on Shabbos, is Machal Shabbos. But if you look at the hours that are posted on the door, it still says Shabbat as the word for Saturday. Even if the store themselves is not keeping Shabbos. You cannot avoid in the grocery store that by Pesach, all the Coke bottles say Chag Sameach, or that before Rosh Hashanah, all of the buses say Shana Tova on the front when the part of the sign on the bus that announces their routes. So even a kid growing up here who is rebelling or questioning or looking on the outside that they are not choosing religion, it is so part of who they are because it's in the water here, it's in the air here. They don't even realize, even as it's in them in a much more holistic way than I think that it happens in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora.
Yeah, I heard a great story that I think it was from Omri Caspi, who's an Israeli basketball player. He said that he grew up here. He was not a religious person whatsoever. He was very chiloni, but he said that he was in America playing the NBA. He found that he had like nothing, and he found himself pulled more towards doing things like I think he said like keeping Shabbos more, putting on tefillin here and there, whatever the example was. Because without practice, without like practical mitzvah to do, there was just nothing. You have no Jewish connection. Mm-hmm. The way I was saying is like here, there's just an intrinsic Jewish connection. Like I think of the kid in school here, like how much emphasis do our kids get in school about like you should be proud to be a Jew? Probably zero. Probably zero. That may sound like horrifying to some person listening to this podcast. Who knows where? But I think it's just people take it here as like a given, and that's not even. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just like that's just what it is. Like you're just. Well, we're all Jewish, and that's just such a norm. And
it kind of reminds me of the mitzvah of living in Israel, that like it's even debated as whether or not it's a mitzvah, and like to us and to some Jews, it doesn't even matter if it's a mitzvah because it's so fundamental. Right. So like if it's like being like having pride in your Judaism, seems like it should be such a fundamental thing that it's not even taught. And in Israel, it's just what it is.
Right.
Right. I think sometimes when things could become norms, as parents or as educators, what happens is, and this is not a good thing necessarily, okay, but you almost take it for granted and you just move on. Like there are parents who made Aliyah with their kids. I don't think it's true, but you made Aliyah with their kids, and they that's it. It's like I said, we're good, so we don't have to talk about the love of Pedspsychisrael, the mitzvah of making Aliyah, things like that, because we did it. But the parents spend zero time talking to their kids about the importance of Pedspsychisrael because it's just sort of like an assumption. And often that's fine, but sometimes it isn't, and the kids sort of can even grow up like resentful, like why am I here? Like why'd you bring me to this godforsaken place? And that I don't identify with that, but the point is, it's a bit of a parenting fail because you forgot, ikar chasem rasef, you forgot to do that. That's just because you do it, you can make a big change in your life, but that's a change that you made in your life. That doesn't mean that you can therefore stop trying to pass in those values. No, values like of being proud of what you're doing and proud of where you are and things like that, that have to continue even after you do it.
Wow. Amazing. So I guess like if we have a little more time, I'd love to talk about what you think about raising kids here in a war, because we've clearly been through a couple of wars in the past couple years. And it's really hard. So I guess from both a parental perspective and also from a psychological perspective, how does that affect children?
Right. So one thing I want to say also, it's just as maybe a good segue also from the previous topic, is that I think sometimes I talk to parents who have a hard time or having a hard time with their kids educationally, religiously, different things like that. And every once in a while, we have to remember that for the kids living in Israel, the past, the math here, 7 years, 6.5 years, something like that, been like terrible. But like educationally, it's been a really rough last like 6-7 years.
But one of our kids has never had a full year of school.
Oh my God.
Between like Corona and all the wars.
Right, because that's an important aspect of it. Like, the COVID or Corona, that really preceded October 7th by not a lot of time. Okay, because it started, Purim 2020, but, we were dealing with the after effects of that for what, like another 2 years or so after that. And that didn't really end that long before this war started. And then we had the war and then the Iran part and then another Iran part. And so the point is, I feel very safe. I feel healthy. I feel good. I don't feel anxious. Okay. I talked to a lot of people who are okay, obviously, but having regardless of all that other stuff, tachlis, a lot of the kids here have missed a tremendous amount of school. And that I think has really turned some of the last few years into been a really non-representative sample of like what, like all the things we're talking about, I think are like in an ideal situation. Tachlis, some of the last few years are really not representative samples of what like the Marechet HaChinuch, the educational system, is or should look like in Israel in general. Okay.
And even though you're saying you don't feel anxious, I'll say I think that there is also in the parenting, there is a cumulative effect here, meaning I think that parents are tired. You're tired because you have, again, if I'll use our son as an example. Our son spent 9th grade, it was Corona, okay? So he missed like these very fundamental years of high school. And then he graduated from high school. Again, wars in the middle of that. Then he went to yeshiva. And now he's in the army. So as his mom and as the mom to my other kids, I went from parenting and working in Corona and also wars. And we are amongst the most privileged group of people in Israel. And that is called people who have a mamad in their house. So when we are in a time where there are a lot of sirens, I have kids who just move out of their rooms and just sleep in the mamad. They spend the whole night there. They're not even disturbed. Their sleep's not disturbed. We all come in. They all snuggle into bed with each other. It's very cute. And then everyone else goes back upstairs to their rooms. But I'm saying, I think that there is certainly a feeling of we're tired. We've been through a lot as a nation, as a people. And I think also in parenting that has an effect, in terms of what dealing with some of these challenges, grappling with some of these challenges. And not every challenge can you necessarily take on with the same excitement and vigor, even though maybe we should. And so sometimes I think that when people from the outside are looking, and I'll also say, again, maybe people will like get their tomatoes ready to throw when I say this. And I don't mean it as a judgment. I just mean it as maybe something to think about as a possibility. I think that a lot of these discussions of my kids aren't going to be from have to do with externals, have to do with what the kids look like. And again, even there, culturally it looks different. In Israel, you could have the frommest young girl in the world, and she could have a nose ring, and she could have like some of the frommest young women I know all have like nose rings and like 6 earrings and if they're married, these like very beautiful, fancy mipachot, but they're so frum. In America, if you would walk around with a nose ring, it's like, oh my gosh, she's at risk. Uh-huh. Here, it's just different. But to go back to that point, I think when people look from the outside, it's also, again, there is a certain amount of fatigue. There is a certain amount of tired. There is a certain amount of struggle. I think like anyone has. But I think it's also important to look at the inside and to see what is going on the inside of these kids, and to understand that they, like my husband was saying, like they're in the middle of their own unfolding of history and their own journey, and they are grappling with it to a degree that I think is extraordinary across the board, even with the hardships and the trauma and the struggling. And they're not running away. They're not buying plane tickets to make Yerida. They're all staying to build the country, to fight for the country, to support the country. And so we have to look at them as whole people and then decide, is the educational system here good? And then decide, are they committed to Hashem? And then decide, are they frum? And not just from like a few quick, if I saw their picture on a shidduch resume, my least favorite thing on earth, if I saw their picture on a shidduch resume, would it check the certain boxes?
Right. I agree with that. I come back to your other point of like, what's it like in terms of the war? It's definitely, it's challenging to parenting. I think that what's true in education, I think is also true here in terms of going to the war, which is a lot of times the parents have to model our behavior, have to model calm as much as possible. Also model that it's okay sometimes not to be calm. Okay, but parents, I think that are wrought with anxiety, and I see a lot of cases where parents essentially broadcast that anxiety to their kids and infect the kids with their own anxiety, because anxiety is contagious. That's a big problem. I don't think you have to not let your kids see your emotion, but there's a right way to do that. For example, a lot of times I'll see kids that are afraid of the sirens. The truth is, again, in Beit Shemesh, like I would say, we feel so privileged. It's not just that we have a mamad, which means if there's ever a problem, we can go down to our mamad. We feel privileged the fact that in Beit Shemesh, for the most part, it's been fine. Okay, for the most part, there was one incident. Right. Okay, but the reality is, if you're living in Beit Shemesh and you follow the rules, you're really safe. Like, not even any question. Like I feel 100% safe, and I'm not worried whatsoever. I think sometimes parents, like they would hear a siren, it would freak out, and the kids, it's like conditioning, right? Like operant conditioning, and the kids essentially get afraid of the sirens, and that's not true. And the sirens are things that actually help us. Like it's a warning that it's a problem. Kids hear a plane overhead, like, oh, is that? Like, no, those are the good guys, right? Those are that's the Air Force, that they're here to protect us. And I think the reality is that it's a parenting challenge that, speaking of cultural differences, a lot of us. Most of us didn't grow up with, but we try to deal with it. Saying to a friend the other day that we felt like I'm very, very old. I'm 51. So, but like those of us that grew up, I was saying like the people that grew up in the age between like the Vietnam War and the Twin Towers. Okay, it's like we did 1975 and 2001. Okay, those years in some respect were like this like idyllic years of just like you could just bike around town and like didn't know anything, and the world's gotten a little more complicated recently. I compare sometimes, for me, so you're a bit younger than us, but I compare like my life as a kid with just like not a care in the world, and part because I didn't know anything, I was a little kid, to nowadays where the kids are exposed to a lot of other stuff and taking your shoes off before you go on the airplane or who knows what, and the reality is it's a different world, and so the kids here I think it's a different kind of childhood. I think we're kind of horrified when our kids started getting Holocaust education here, and it's really blunt. Like Holocaust education in Israel, even
age appropriate. It is age appropriate.
It is, but it's not as it doesn't. It minces less words.
Yes, that is definitely true.
Okay, now that's not bad necessarily. And someone sat there and thought about it. Someone much smarter than me about Holocaust education. Look at and think about it. It's not a problem, but it's just a good example that there are things here that again, it's a cultural difference. That things are just talked about here in a different way. I actually don't think it's bad. It's just different. And I think as a parent, you have to learn how to get used to that, learn how to figure that out. That doesn't mean, people here talk about like cultural integration and cultural assimilation or adaptation. It's definitely true. I think you have to adapt to the culture. And I think people, even live in a place like Beit Shemesh, it's actually very easy to just not do that and sort of speak only English if you want to and stay in your little bubble. I tell parents that I don't think that's, forget values. It's just not smart, because the reality is when your kid becomes 18 or pick an age, 25, I don't know, like eventually that's not what they're going to want to do, or they're going to want to be able to go outside in the world, and they can't function as well, or you've limited them to such a small area. why would you want to do that? And that has nothing to do with values. Just that having been said, the rabbi, one of the shuls we daven at, he liked to say, Shenkelevsky says that is a shul. It's funny. He's an Israeli rabbi for a shul of probably 80% Anglo-Olim, and he says that you shouldn't give up all of your values coming from America. He says a lot of things you could actually bring with you and help improve Israeli society if you bring those things and import them with you and help make this a better place, which I think is really true. It's about how to navigate that and how to navigate it being different, and whether it's a different culture or how to deal with a war, things which we didn't grow up with those kinds of things. How to figure that out.
I think such a stark example of that is, let's say you take the day of your wedding. So what was I thinking about the day of my wedding? What were you thinking about? You wanted to daven a very good mincha, right? And have time for that while everyone's like, don't forget the photographer, okay? And the hair and the makeup. I mean, whatever. And like being with your family and all those things. I think here, when young people are planning their wedding days, like so many of the guys are like, I have to have time to go to Har Herzl because they might have had, God forbid, a friend who's buried there. That's such a different existence. And the fact that that's what they want to do on their wedding day, it to me is so tremendous. Or I need to go to the kotel to daven, right? Meaning all of these things, these are things that we just didn't grow up with this. And again, there are plenty of things in diaspora Jewish life that are incredible. One of the things I really say to my students, but it's like a cute, sticky thing. If they'll say like, oh, I'm going back to Shmutz La'aretz. I actually think I hate that. I stop them every time they say it, because I think that we have to appreciate and value the fact that Hashem helps Am Yisrael spread Torah in every corner of the world. And I think that our job as Jews in a diaspora is to set up mechanisms for Torah learning and growth while we are in that diaspora. And that is to the credit of Am Yisrael, and it is with the blessing and grace of Hashem. But I think that, at least the way that I think about it is, I don't think about us anymore as being in the era of the diaspora. I don't think that. We all know Mashiach is not fully here, but we are certainly in the era of Mashiach. We are watching it unfold literally with our eyes every single day. So a person, again, what do I want to say? Do I want to be in the front seat of that, even though it's not perfect? Or do I want to wait till it's perfectly curated and then I can step in? And so it might be easier to wait till it's all set up and then step in. But to me, there's something so incredible about saying, but I want to be one of the builders. I want to be one of the contributors, even when it was hard and even when it was rocky. And I'm not saying that to cast aspersions on anyone who doesn't feel that way. And again, as a mom, I really, really understand those concerns. And our kids are not perfect, and our kids have their challenges, and their friends have their challenges. It's all human beings trying to navigate this very complicated world. But I think that there is such a value of saying we are walking into the future and we are bringing our kids actively into that future, and that's the destiny of Am Yisrael.
Wow, that was incredible. Okay, I have one last question for you that you don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable.
Okay.
But do you think that all Jews should be in Israel now?
That's a great question.
Like now?
Like literally. Like get them on the plane this second.
I think it's a complicated question to answer, like a yes or no. Do I think the right thing to do for people, like en masse, should everyone just hop on the plane and make Aliyah? Sure. Okay. That's easy to say that and like on a gross kind of big picture level, right? On a particular level, no. Meaning there are many people who, look, sometimes our educators say, look, I can't, I think this, refractor quotes this or salvation quote this, like the idea that, the captain doesn't get off the ship, right? The general doesn't leave the army. So that's true. But, on the other hand, if the whole army went, so then the general would go too. And that's, and chas v'shalom is not criticism of anybody. I'm just saying that's just the fact. And I think they would probably say the same thing. Okay. Reality is they're not all going. So if everybody went, then everybody would go. Okay. Meaning part of the problem is the idea of kibbutz galiyot, is that if everybody went, then a lot of other reasons why people don't go, they wouldn't be there. So should everybody individually, like as irrespective of everybody else, should they go? That's hard for me to say, because a lot of people really are not equipped to go as individuals. Like we felt like we could do this. We could pick up our lives and go, and then there was hard parts, and just because it was the right thing to do doesn't mean it wasn't hard. Okay, and just because it's hard doesn't mean it wasn't the right thing to do. Could everybody pick up and go? Should they? That makes it complicated, right? If you could pick up everybody and put them here, when I push that button, I'd push the button. And I think a lot of people who are hesitant to do it, a lot of their problems would basically go away if it was everybody coming. The reality is there is no button like that. And so you can't have everyone in one fell swoop go. There's only one way that happens, and that's al kanfei nisharim, right?
On airplanes.
Right. Conveyor Nisharim Airlines, right?
Right.
But if it's not like that, then it's a much more complicated question, which is like, there's a population level and statistics, right? It's like the population level. What do you say for everybody? And then if you get to an individual, what should you do? So when my students ask me, should they make Aliyah? I say, sure, of course. If they say, okay, well, let's talk tachlis, I'll always say, you're better off making it well than fast. I know not everyone holds this way, right? But I think you're better off making Aliyah well than fast. And if it's not now, if it's in 10 years, if it's whatever it is, but just do it the right way. Maybe it means getting education first. Maybe it means getting married first. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's better off now. Okay, I don't think it's like make Aliyah as fast as you can at any cost on an individual level. And again, there may be individuals who say, I can't because my mom is sick. I can't because I'm the head of a community. I can't because I function this or that. I can't because I'm a Spanish teacher and I have to retrain because I can't. At the individual level, there are really reasons why people don't do it. It's not like everyone's reasons is invalid. I don't think that's a realistic thing. I could push the button, it would just work out. But I don't have that button, unfortunately.
I think that I'm going to answer, since you answered that so well, I'll answer a different question. I think that there is a lot of fear and a lot of emotion about picking up your life and moving 6,000 miles away, and a lot of uncertainty. Will I like where I live? Will I like my house? I'll tell a very embarrassing story to all of your tons of watchers. When we made Aliyah, I did the absolute craziest thing. The size of paper that they use in Israel is different than the size of paper than they use in America. In Israel, they use A4 paper. It's tall and skinny. In America, they use, what's it called? Letter. Yeah. And that's like a little shorter and fatter. And I got this, in Hebrew, they'd say like a juk barosh. Like I got this crazy idea. And I am sure that this was like part of my emotional coping with some of the things that were very challenging about Aliyah. I was like, I am not going to give in to that Israeli paper size. And on our lift, no, I'm not joking. On our lift, I brought several cases of American size paper and also like sheet dividers and binders, because I was like, now again, it's so irrational. When I think about that story, it is so obviously linked to like some emotional, real upheaval I was having about making Aliyah. And then we landed here, and that was fine for about 15 minutes until I realized that I cannot fight the entire state of Israel about the paper size. But what I did also learn, even in that, is that the minute we landed here, I was like, why did I do this? So much of the fear happens because you're walking into something unknown, right? And anytime, even if you take the example of a kid packing for their year in Israel, why did everyone put something like ridiculous into their suitcase? Every single person, guy, girl, every single person. Because they're scared. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. Maybe I'll need this thing, right? A girl might say, maybe I really need 23 pairs of shoes, right? Because I don't know. maybe I'll get invited to one wedding. And so I need 3 shoe options. Okay. If you know, you know. But the point is that the minute you step into the reality, all of the things that you were afraid of, first of all, some of them don't even materialize. But even the ones that do, you realize, oh, I'm a human being and I'm equipped to deal with life's challenges. And one of the most important things that we can carry with us is the fact that we don't have to do it alone. And something that certainly was true when we made Aliyah, but I think now is even more true in exponentially more true is the amount of support, the amount of community, the amount of people who will take you to the grocery store, take you to no one even uses a post office anymore, but take you wherever you need to go. The schools in communities that attract Olim have coordinators to help with families in terms of choosing schools and helping their kids adjust, certainly if their kids are older. Like you really feel, there's a phrase like it takes a village. You really find your village here. And so even if you are, if you're a person and you're thinking about, should I make Aliyah? Should I not make Aliyah? I don't know, this, that. Just understand that when you land here, there is an entire country of people who all want to help you and who all are so happy that you're here, without exception. I have never...
They want to help you even if you don't ask for it. Sometimes even if you don't want the help, they want to help you.
But we have never met a single person who was like, no, I won't help you with that. Even on a professional level. It's not... oh, you might come and take up my space. It's competitive. It's come and I'm going to help you. And that's whether you're a psychologist or a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer, across the board. And I think that that's something that just speaks exactly to the heart of what it is to live here and what it is to be here as a member of Am Yisrael. And I'll even say, like in the show notes, you could put my email address. And if anyone could reach out, and we're happy to help you.
So generous.
But it's true. It's just true. And people helped us. Total strangers helped us. I remember looking when I was on this house tour for the house we didn't buy. How did I get there? I went to visit a school. I got into a car with some teachers I didn't know. I was like invited to someone's house I didn't even know for dinner. They brought like 10 people to come talk to me about making Aliyah. And then when I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, but how do you even afford, all of the things that you need to do here? And they just literally looked and they were like, what, number one, Hashem helps. And number two, there are people here who have been here for longer, who have some wisdom about that. And they are here to help you. And that's kal v'chomer true now when you have Facebook groups about finances in Israel. You have which supermarket to go to on which day, all these technicals, but it's the spirit of that. So if it's something, this feeling of fear, you are not walking into a bubble here. You are not walking into the year in Israel when you make Aliyah. You are not spending every Friday eating froyo, and you are not going out every Monday night to dinner, and you are not having an impromptu kumsitz in your living room. I mean, maybe you are, but
my friends still do that.
Most people, that's amazing, right? You're not necessarily having like an impromptu kumsitz in your living room. So you're entering real life with all of its challenges and all of its problems and all of its, uncertainties. Mm-hmm. But everywhere you go, you have brothers and sisters and imas and abbas and savtas and even children, even if they're not your own children, who are there to say, let me help you and walk along this path with you. And again, to me, that's the geula.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
For coming on. I learned so much. I really genuinely did, because I always say I wanted to start this podcast so I could really have conversations about things that I didn't see the full picture on and that I just haven't had life experience on. So thank you so much for using your knowledge in your life and sharing that with me and everyone. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. And you should be blessed to do many more and continue doing your incredible work.
Thank you so much.